There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 337. And today in the show, we have got a fascinating discussion on the merits of the traveling hunter lifestyle and spot and stalk hunting big whitetails from the ground. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Onyx. Today I am joined by Tony Trietch for what ends up being, or I guess it ended up being, a real cool conversation. I just got done recording this one, and Tony is not a hunting industry guy. He's not working full-time in this line of work. Rather, he actually started and built up a construction company up in my neck of the woods of northern Michigan. At least I'm going to claim them as my neck of the woods since I love that area. But he has built his career and really his whole lifestyle in such a way that Tony's able to travel the country every single fall in search of deer and elk and other big game. And he does it for 2, 3, 4 months a year. And I'm not just saying he goes out there for a week in September and then a week in October and then a week in November. No, he goes out there nonstop. Like he'll take off in August and he won't come home until November, that kind of thing. And he's living out of a tent or the back of his truck, and he's hunting all sorts of critters across the West and the Great Plains, and used to spend a lot of time in the Midwest. And he's basically living this dream that a whole lot of us have, and he's doing it with a tremendous amount of success. And of particular interest to me, and probably to a lot of you, a big part of that success has come in the form of chasing and killing a whole lot of big, mature bucks. And he's doing it uniquely by spotting, stalking, decoying, and calling them in on the ground. And I'm pretty sure this is right. Tony's done this without having used a tree stand since 2012. So today in the show, I'm grilling Tony on these two main topics. Number one, how he's able to pull off this traveling, vagabond hunting lifestyle for months at a time, what that's like, the good and the bad. How does he balance his travel with family obligations, some DIY camping tips, and a whole bunch of stuff along those lines. And then we get into the nitty-gritty of his aggressive approach to hunting big whitetails on the ground. And I'm telling you what, this one's fascinating. It just got me really excited. So I can't wait for you guys to hear it. But before that, you guys ever have that where words are in your mind and then when they get to your mouth, it's like you get stumbled up on your tongue? Happens to me a whole lot. Just unfortunately, I do it in front of tens of thousands of people who have to hear me sound like an idiot. So sorry for that. But what I'm trying to say is that before that, I want to give you an update on the shed hunting, trash collecting thing that Dan and I were brainstorming last week. Again, another example of us sounding like idiots. We've decided on a hashtag for that, and we're going to call it Tines and Trash. So the hashtag sign and then Tines and Trash. I hope you guys will join Dan and I this spring. When you go out shed hunting, just bring along a trash bag and pick up trash throughout your walk. Simple as that. And if you want to post a pic with your trash on Instagram, use that Tines and Trash hashtag and maybe, give a couple words of encouragement to others out there to do the same. I'll be keeping an eye on the hashtag and just at random pick some folks to send some prizes out to. Nothing big or crazy, but I do want to just give some folks, a a little bit of extra incentive to do this and just, give you a pat in the back for doing a good thing. So I'm going to send out some Wired Hunt stickers, maybe some signed copies of That Wild Country, maybe a Wired Hunt Yeti Rambler, stuff like that. So yeah, hopefully this is just a fun way to get see, a whole lot of that's happening today. I'm hoping this is a good way to just remind us all to try to keep our wild places clean. And I got to be honest, I'm not always good about it. I get so focused on the task, as I do in many cases. I get tunnel vision, and I just probably walk right by stuff without even thinking about it. And I realized how bad that I typically probably do, because yesterday I went out shed hunting and I brought my trash bag, and I was much more focused on looking for trash. And when I started really paying attention to it, man, it was kind of depressing how bad it was. You couldn't walk 50 yards without seeing some more junk out there. And it was just a good reminder that I need to be better at this kind of thing. And maybe a lot of us can do a little bit better. I know a lot of people have been doing this a lot in the past. So kudos to everyone out there who's been better than me at picking up trash out there in the woods. Thank you for inspiring me to try to get a little bit better. And thanks to the Wired Hunt fans, several of you who suggested this to me over the previous months, and which led to us trying this out. So, Tines and Trash, that's the hashtag. Hashtag, not the hashtag. Having a hell of a day here, guys. That is the hashtag. Post your pics. I'll be keeping an eye out. And that's my final update. And now, enough of all that. Enough of my rambling, tongue tumbling miscues. Let's just get to this chat with Tony Trietch. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this one. All right, with me now on the line is Tony Trietch. Welcome to the show, Tony.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Glad to be on. Thanks for having me with you today.
I'm glad to be able to make this happen. You're up in my neck of the woods, aren't you? Kind of the northern part of Michigan?
Yep, Traverse City.
Nice. Sweet. I'm down in the southern part of the state, but my family deer camp is just about a half hour south of you there. So I love that part of the state. It's a great place.
We might have to talk about that later, because I grew up about a half hour south of here too, so it might be pretty close.
Nice. Yes. When we get off air, we'll have to talk specifics. That's great. It's definitely that whole area, the northern lower, kind of formed the foundation of my outdoor passions. And it's funny. I keep finding, and maybe I'm biased here, but it just seems like Michigan, especially West and Northwest Michigan, breeds just really, really good sportsmen and women, really passionate hunters and anglers and also writers. I mean, you're up there. My buddy Steve Rinella's from there. You've got Hemingway that spent time up there. Jim Harrison spent time up there. A whole lot of outdoors people seem to have had that Michigan influence.
Well, that's a pretty prestigious group to have my name in there with. I'm not sure if I belong in there, but thanks.
Well, hey, you're from everything I've seen, you're one hell of a hunter, and you've done some different cool projects across the outdoor world too. So I've been kind of distantly aware of you for some time, and then I came across an article in Field and Stream last year, I think, in which you were featured, and I got really intrigued, and I put you on my list of like people I really need to talk to eventually, and somehow I got distracted and never ended up following up with you, but I'm glad we're finally doing it, because you do a lot of things uniquely, but there's two things in particular that stand out to me that really intrigue me. You and anytime you jump in here and correct me if I'm off base on any of these things I'm seeing about you and reading about you and hearing from you, but it seems like you have built a life for yourself that's pretty unique compared to most people. You've kind of built a world and a yearly schedule and a career that has been 100% centered on hunting and allowing yourself to go and hunt and adventure as much as you possibly want. Am I right in that you have kind of very thoughtfully crafted your life to create the time and space and freedom to hunt this way? Is that right?
Cool. Yeah, no, that's true. I started a business in my early 20s as a carpenter, and realized real fast that if I want to spend time hunting, it was going to have to, that was the only way, was to be my own boss, and I make sure that the people that work for me and the people that I work with know that, it's kind of this thing, when the fall rolls around, Tony's going to be gone. And it's definitely evolved over the years from just being gone maybe a couple weeks at a time, traveling around the Midwest and Illinois and Iowa and Ohio and Kansas, to now traveling all across the country and the mountains. And the biggest hurdle for me is, with that is managing the people. And but I've been pretty lucky that I've got some good people, and it's worked out so far.
So you're from some of the things I've heard, you're sometimes taking off in July or August and then not coming back till what, November or December or something like that. Is that accurate?
There has been years, yeah. Last year I think I left, or I guess it was this past year wasn't as bad. Well, if you ask my now wife, she'd probably tell you it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as 2018. 2018 I left July 20th, 28th, something like that. In that range, the last 3 weeks of July, somewhere in there, because I had a Nevada tag, an early Nevada tag that I wanted to scout for, and I'd never been in the unit. I was just going off from some info from another friend, and then I basically had hunts lined up all all across the West, right up until pretty much the end of November. And usually I'll try to get home sometime in late October before I leave again for the whitetail rut. That's like a whole other separate thing, but that year I didn't get to, and I was gone almost 4 months in a row there.
Wow.
This past year was only, I think it was just shy of 3 months. So
a lot of people dream of doing something like that, right? This idea of just hunting nonstop, touring the country, checking off all these bucket list hunts. A lot of people like that idea, but not a whole lot of people actually do it. Why? Why do you actually do it? Why, like, what's at the root of this being like a reality of your life? I realize like it's really easy to say, well, I just love to hunt, but there's got to be something deeper that has led you to like this very extreme. I think it's fair to say like an extreme lifestyle choice. Why?
Yeah. Probably the biggest reason is no one's told me no. I just recently got married, so that and I've vetted her for 3 seasons before I put a ring on her finger, so she knows what she's in for.
That's good.
But we actually joked about putting in the prenuptial agreements. That I would we agreed on 3 months a year instead of 4. But I got really good at what I did for a living. So in my area, I'm basically a carpentry subcontractor, and I have a reputation of being one of the best. So myself and my guys were in high demand, and people that wanted us, it came with the expectation that I'm not going to be there for these months, and they know that. If I wasn't good at what I did, I probably wouldn't have been able to demand that extra clause in the contract, so to speak. But because we were really good, we had a great reputation of getting things done the right way and not taking advantage of situations, and treating people right. And because of that, everything just kind of fell into place. And I had great employees too. I've had for the last 20 years, I've had some fantastic men working for me, and if it wasn't for that, if I had never found good employees, then you can't do something like that. As far as maybe in my nature, like what makes it possible is it's probably the same reason the mountains are so intriguing to me now, and I spend more time there than I do in the Midwest. It's just because there's a little bit of a mystique to it, like what's over the next mountain. Well, what's the next? It's just there's something always calling me to go a little bit further and try something new.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that. Do you think that? And I gotta believe it's probably some of both, but I'm curious how you think about it. Do you look at this? Is it more so the hunting itself? Is it the fact that you just love the hunt, or is it the adventure side of things and like the whole travel and journey of months at a time living off grid? Because unless this has changed recently, as I understand it, you're pretty much camping the whole time. I don't think you get hotels and things like that typically. What is it? Is it the combination? Is it one or the other that really makes this thing such a thing? Or just describe to me the different facets of this kind of expedition of sorts.
Good questions, Mark. So that's that's a good question. I think that there's I don't think that because I do all different types of hunting. Some of it's backpack, some of it's I have I set up a car camp. And you're right, I don't use the hotel rooms. I think I stayed in a hotel room one time last year, or last season. I mean, and that was just because I got done super late at night and I was covered in elk blood. But
good problem.
Yeah, no, it was a good day. I don't think it is necessarily the hunt. I shouldn't say that. It isn't actually the punching of the tag. It's the thing I look forward to the most, and this probably would explain it better, is scouting season.
Yeah.
And this also is one of my big secrets that helps me be successful at tagging giant animals every year is get there early, put the time in scouting. I'd much rather have a week of scouting and 3 days of hunting or 4 days of hunting than, 1 or 2 days to look around and then 10 days of hunting. That scouting is key. And that scouting is also my favorite time of the year. Like you give me 10 days, just cruising around looking for, it doesn't matter if it's Kansas whitetails, in the prairie, or if it's Colorado up in the high country in August above timberline, scouting with a camera and trying to find that buck that I want to, be my target. I'm like, okay, this is the guy we're going to go after. That's my favorite time there, bar none.
Yeah. Man, I can totally relate to that. I love those days preceding the hunt when you're watching and looking and enjoying everything around the hunt still. You're basically hunting, but there's still that anticipation that's pretty awesome. So, okay, so let's dig in a little further into what this is actually, what's the reality of this kind of thing? Because again, I'm thinking, I know there's a lot of people out there that sit in their cubicle and dream of living your life. Dream of that lifestyle. I'm sure it's not all rainbows and butterflies though.
No.
So what are some of the best things of this kind of lifestyle, or about this your 2 or 3 or 4 month voyage? What are some of the things that stand out as like the best unexpected moments? Like, of course, we know seeing a big buck's great, and we know that getting a deer on the ground is gonna be a great thing. But what are a couple of the little things that just make the inside of you smile? And then on the flip side, what are a couple of the things about this lifestyle or about that 2 or 3 or 4 month trip that are just like the unknown shit that you deal with that most people wouldn't think about? What are a few things on both sides of the coin that stand out?
Boy, I think that they both probably revolve around the same thing, and that's people. I get to meet, and I have met some amazing people on the side of the mountain that are friends to this day. People in every state, and you see some cool, crazy animal stuff. If you're in the woods, whether it be the Midwest or the mountains for 120 days a year, you're going to see some stuff that not many other people are seeing. And I've seen some crazy things happen. I've seen animals doing things that maybe most people don't see. So that's always cool. The worst things that can happen are back to the people thing. It's, I'm away from the people I love for a long time. And every year I make my wife now and we've always made the agreement that, if I tag out early somewhere and I still have, if I have, maybe 6 days before the next hunt starts, maybe I'll only scout 4 days and I'll fly, I literally just park the truck at an airport, fly home for a night or two, and then fly back to that airport and then jump back in the truck and start over again. But it just never seems to happen. It's like I'm always running behind, and I'm literally racing from mountain to, from state to state. And it's not, sometimes you tag out early and it's like, wow, I got, I can leisurely now drive from New Mexico to Montana, which if anybody's never done that before, you're basically driving from Canada to Mexico, and it's further than it is from Michigan to Nevada.
Wow.
And I did that trip 3 times last year. It's not always just relaxing and fun, and it's just go to, and it's my fault. I mean, I pile too many tags on a lot of times, and I'm not just hunting premium, limited entry tags. I'm hunting any tag I can get. A lot of times I just try to fill up my schedule, and it sometimes becomes a little bit of a wear, wears on a guy, and you miss the people at home, you miss your dogs, I miss my coworkers, the guys that on the job site. The with modern technology, we always got everybody right at our fingertips, and we can chat and text with people and friends. But when I'm out there for that long, even when I run into a gas station, I'm chatty catty, which is not my normal personality. And people probably they don't know me, so they don't think anything of it. But I mean, you can only talk to yourself without going somewhat crazy for so long before you need a little bit of people time.
Yeah.
And
well, that's one of the things I was curious about is I've done a lot of these solo trips myself, but they've always been 7 to 12 days, and even in that period when I'm all by myself on a hunt of some kind, camping out in the back of my truck, even then it starts to I like it a lot, but you still do start to feel a little bit of that loneliness or a little bit of that kind of inside your head cabin fever. How do you deal with that when you're doing that for 120 days, or is it simply what you just said? You just talk to folks at the gas station or at the diner or stuff like that. Is there any other things that you're doing to stay sane?
Well, I think I probably started talking to myself on the second day there, or second away from home. That starts pretty quick. It's when I start arguing with myself that's when I know there's a problem. But I'm a I don't know how you say this. I can focus in on problems pretty well. And when I have a target animal, if I've found an animal, even if I haven't seen him in a long time, as long as I know it's there, it's super easy for me to focus and stay. I wake up in the morning with one thought in my mind: the whole day, hunt hard, go to bed, in a tent somewhere on the side of a mountain, wherever my day ended, and the next day start over again. And then 10 days can go by before I realize, like, oh crap, I'm out of food, and I gotta hike back the truck or whatever. So it's only when I don't have that, how would you say that, point of focus. If say you go somewhere and you scout for 5 days, you don't find anything. I don't find anything I want to hunt. That's when things start turning and getting weird. Or if I've literally had my buck shot out from underneath me. I've literally had gyroscoping pictures of a buck that I found a couple days before. Was on my way to another, because I stopped in that state to just scout for like 4 or 5 days. Was leaving that state, go to another state to scout and then hunt. And I'm having dinner at a little restaurant, and I look at my phone on Instagram, and I saw the same buck that I just took pictures of an hour or two ago in the same bed. Someone else literally just found him. He hasn't even moved yet. Like, he was still there. And your heart sinks. And it's times like that. It's where it's really hard to just to keep it together. But if I guess if that carrot's out in front of me, if I can see the end, then it's really easy for me to just buckle down, focus on what I got to do, and get it done, and then move on to the next state.
It's funny you mentioned that. When you're so focused on something, I found personally, when I'm hunting or fishing, in particular for me, fly fishing, and in particular bow hunting, when I'm involved in one of those two things, almost nothing else can get in my head. Like for that 5 hours or that 10 hours or that 7 days, I'm fully enveloped and consumed by this thing. And I don't think about politics and I don't think about the crap that's going on at home or some weird tiff with a friend or something going on with work. I can just be wholly consumed by this one thing. And that's always been something that I think is really unique, that I don't know if I can find that anywhere else in the world in my life. That's something that's always drawn me to these things, I think. Is that something that's true for you too? I mean, is that part of what pulls you out doing these things for so long? Is it to, I don't want to say it's an escape, but maybe there's a little bit of that to what I like about it. I'm not sure how exactly I would explain it, but does any of that resonate with you?
Yeah. No, that there's definitely a different feeling I get literally when I'm pulling up to a trailhead and there's a big mountain in front of me, and you're not thinking about anything else. Like, it's just, I've got a big task in front of me, and maybe it's somewhere you've been, maybe it's somewhere you haven't been, but either way, there's a gigantic puzzle in front of you that you got to figure out, and it's going to take everything, if you want to do it, get the most out of it, it's going to take everything you got to get it done. Yeah. And it's the same thing in the Midwest too. I mean, the problems are different, but it's with any trip, no matter where you're going, I guess, as far as on that same line of thought, you have to have everything settled and good at home before you can go on a trip and be away from home doing a hunt like that for any length of time. Otherwise, when you do get to the mountain, you're still gonna be worrying about the problems you left at home. Everything has to be buckled up and tidy at home before you can really enjoy anything out there. So
that's a great point. Speaking along those lines, one of the things that I've talked about for years and years here on the podcast with my buddy Dan, we've always talked about the challenges of how you can balance your love for hunting with your obligations at home and with your relationships. What does that look like for you with your now wife? I think one of the biggest things that a lot of people have a hard time with is trying to explain to their significant other. And maybe it's a wife, or maybe the hunter's a female and she's got a husband who doesn't get it, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. How explaining why this matters so much, explaining why you have to go off for a 7-day trip or a 7-week trip. How have you gone about trying to explain that to your girlfriend and now your wife and have it make sense to her? Or is the reason she's your wife now because she just innately got it?
Yeah, that there's probably a little bit of both there. She literally, like, on our first date, I learned real quick, you better explain it to him up front, kind of what you do with your life, or there's going to be a big surprise later for one of you. And so she knew exactly what she was getting into, and I think they all would when you tell someone that like when I tell somebody I hunt a lot, and they're like, oh yeah, how much? I'm like, well, usually 3 or 4 months. They're like, oh yeah, we hunt birds in September, and then all the different seasons. I'm like, no, I'm gone for 3 or 4 months straight. And so literally, I remember telling Jody that over the phone, and she's like, what do you mean? And I think we were FaceTiming, and I literally I took my phone and I just kind of I was in my living room and I just kind of made a little 360 spin so she could see all, because I've got I don't even know how many heads are in the house. And she's like, oh, that's a different type of art than I was thinking it would be on the walls in the house. But so she knew what she was getting into, and she's seen the passion that I have for it, and she knows I'm a pretty passionate guy about everything. And I remember, after she knew me for a while, and she'd look at some of the pictures that I'd take and these, say after I got something on the ground, and she could see the type of smile that I had. I remember her saying, I've never seen you smile like this. I don't know that I've never seen you that happy before. And a couple years ago, I got a chance to take her with me. She was able to get some time off from her work to go on a scouting trip up in Colorado to the high country in late July. It was mid-July. And, hike up above timberline. It was just beautiful, big green basins, and she got to see all kinds of animals. And I think she kind of fell in love with it too. And I think she understood. I mean, she gets why it means so much to me. And she realizes that it's part of who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great to find a partner like that who can, appreciate that and support you in that way. So this raises an interesting question though, because you have someone who understands why you love this and who's been out there with you and has found joy in it too. Why do you choose to do most of this stuff solo though? I know I've got friends that wonder why I like to take off for these trips on my own. My wife thinks, why it's got to be lonely or boring or dangerous or something. And I certainly do like doing some trips with friends. There's a certain different kind of fun with that. But there's something special about taking off on your own and just being with yourself and the mission in front of you. What's that for you? Why is that an important part of what you do? Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not an important part.
Well, I think it started out as just a matter of I was more effective. I was more lethal alone. And I realized that when I was hunting in the Midwest with buddies who weren't as careful about how they got to their tree stands or got out at night, or they weren't as careful about, their scent setups or playing the wind. And it's like, I just got sick of dealing with, and I love the guys. They're great guys. And I just got to the point where I'm like, I don't want to have to deal with everybody else's mistakes. I've got enough of my own. And I started hunting on my own, and I started killing bigger, better animals. And so when I went to the mountains and started doing it out there, it was natural to be alone. And even though I didn't know what I was doing, thank God for a couple of great websites out there that, you can really learn a lot about that. But and honestly, I have hunted with somebody. I think that this is 2 years in a row now. I've hunted with a guy that I met on the side of a mountain in Wyoming. We became friends when we met, and then he invited me to hunt with him in just a general deer area in Wyoming the last couple of years, and I spent a week with him the last 2 years. But it's it's not hard for me to be alone. I think that I'm very comfortable. And I don't get scared. I don't get lonely. I shouldn't say I don't get lonely. I miss my family and friends, but it's not. I don't need to. There's nothing in me that just says I need to have people around all the time. That's probably my true. That's kind of who I am. I've always just been a little bit of a loner, and if the friends are around, great. If not, that's great too. But it definitely has its challenges. Especially in the mountains when you get something down. But it's I actually look forward to hunting now, probably with people. Those are like almost my the hunt in Wyoming that I was talking about with my buddy Derek. We didn't shoot deer last year. Neither of us here, and it was one of my most memorable hunts of the year. It was a lot of fun. But so it's one of the hunts now that I look forward to, and I'm sure there'll be more in the future where I'm not alone. But
so spending so much time on the road doing this kind of thing, I gotta believe you've put your gear through the ringer. You've put your whole camp life process through the ringer. You've figured some stuff out by now. What are a few of the most crucial pieces of gear that you've come across that just make living on the road or living in a pull-off on national forest land or somewhere? What are a couple of things that stand out as, man, this thing is the ticket? Or maybe it's a customized piece of gear or something. Is there a couple things that stand out as something that, geez, has just changed your life in some small way?
Oh, this is funny. It has really not much to do with hunting, but it's one of those little pump showers that I think it's made by Nemo, and it's just this little teeny. You put a couple gallons of water in it and step on it with your foot. It's just got like a 6-foot hose on the end of it, and it is a game changer. Without that thing, there are a lot of hunts that I'd be running 100 miles back every couple of days for a shower because there's just no other good sources of water, no creeks to jump in, and that thing has saved me a lot of fuel and time. Good food. When you're gone, so when I leave, my whole truck is packed for that entire time. I've got a little trailer I pull behind me with freezers and coolers. And the last couple of years, I've taken a quad, the smallest 4x4 ATV I could find, just because I beat my truck up so much over the years. And the whole back of the truck's just full of gear, but very organized. And all of those things in there, like there's nothing in the truck I don't need, and there's a bunch of things that I have spares of. But one of the most important things and that's something I overlooked the first few years, is food. Because when you're living off from dehydrated or freeze-dried food for that long, and snack bars and jerky and the lightweight things that we take up the mountains with us, or the things that we have in a tent somewhere, it is just it gets old real fast. Your body doesn't do well with it, and I would say food is one of the good freeze-dried food, and there are some really good options out there now. And good bars, like you have to be really careful with that stuff. Your average, and I think they're getting better, but the old standby, what they call power bars or whatever, those things were just full of sugar, and a bunch of them were, and there's a bunch of healthy ones now. But yeah, a shower and good food basically is those are the key things that people wouldn't think of that are pretty key in the truck.
Yeah. So what's the food of choice? What's your favorite brands or meals or bars? What ends up in your truck when you head out for these things?
Well, the bars, there's so many new ones out there. It's almost like I think there's 3 or 4 different brands in my hometown now. So I'm always trying new bars, and that's I really haven't settled on one. But as far as freeze-dried food, there's a small company called Off Grid Food Company, and they make absolutely fantastic freeze-dried food. And it's I want to say it's all organic. All their there's no if anyone's ever eaten Mountain House for a long time, it's just packed full of sodium. And I think that's part of it. I think it's just part of the way to keep its shelf life. But I want to say Off Grid only uses sea salt, so it's got a lot of sea salt in it, but it's naturally healthy salt. So the difference in the way I feel after eating that for 5 days versus or 50 versus Mountain House is substantial. And they're good people too. There's nothing better than finding a product you love and then getting to meet the people that they're behind it, and they're great dudes. So
that's awesome.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
When I talk to someone like you and hear about the things that you're doing out there, it gives me this itch to get out and do something like that too. It gives me, I already have that itch right now this time of year. I've got crazy cabin fever. I just want to get out doing something different and take off on a road trip and head off in the mountains or whatever it might be. But I'm definitely getting that again, just hearing you describing, the trips that you're going on, and I'm getting inspired. Who has inspired you when it comes to this stuff? Is there a person, or is there a book or a writer or a movie or anything out there that has kind of inspired this wanderlust or sense of adventure in you?
Boy, that's a good one. Well, my dad was the guy that had me in a tree stand when I was 8 years old, telling me to be quiet, for, but I don't think he ever hung out of the state until I was out of high school. And I'm taking him back to Kansas this year, with me for the first time in who knows how long. He's definitely been my biggest inspiration in the hunting side of my life. But as far as inspiration for getting, and doing the hunting away from home, there wasn't. When I started doing it around the Midwest, I really didn't know of anybody else that was doing it. I'm sure there was. It just, it was prior to the internet, maybe not the internet, but social media, and there just wasn't anybody that I knew of doing it. When I started to transition to the mountains and the plains from the Midwest, Aaron Snyder, the now president of Cafaro, was one of the guys that, back in the days on the forums and stuff, he was willing to help guys, and he helped me a lot. So, I reached out to him out of a necessity. I'd bought a backpack that was just killing me. And I reached out to him, and it wasn't even the backpack that he sold, but he helped me, figure out how to get it fit to me. And then he gave me some advice on my next backpack purchase, which was one of theirs. And oh my God. Yeah. So he was a big help, but I've never really been someone to idolize anybody. So it's just there's been some people that have helped me along the way, but as far as the mentors are really wasn't. Yeah, rock slide was like I said before, that if it wasn't for the information that's on the internet, like on places like rock slide where I write for sometimes, that helps guys. Like I didn't know anything. It helps guys that you're in the Midwest and you want to come out to the mountains and do a DIY hunt. You can literally, there's guys in there that'll help you, and there's information there that'll help you with whatever you want. It takes a lot of pain on a learning curve for sure, and that's basically all I did.
Yeah, a lot of great resources out there. So as I understand it, it was somewhere around 2011. Well, I guess maybe I'm totally wrong on that. But at some point, as you started heading out west more and more often, started doing the whole mountain thing, the prairie hunting. I think I read somewhere that somewhere around 2011, you realized that when it came to whitetails, you didn't want to use a tree stand anymore. You decided to ditch the standard game that you've been doing forever and stay on the ground. First off, is that correct? And then secondly, how did you come to this epiphany that you were going to be a more lethal hunter on the ground than in a tree?
There's a lot there. That's a whole podcast. So I grew up, like I said, I was in the tree stand, and my dad was kind of one of those guys that was not afraid of heights, and none of his hunting buddies would climb his tree stands. And I was up there at 8 years old with him. And so my tree stands became the same way. When I was hunting the Midwest, none of my buddies would use my stands because it was not uncommon for them to be 30 feet plus in the air. And I fell once. Not that that had any effect on me not wanting to hunt him anymore, but I've lived the whole, sit in a tree stand all day, all of November, every single day of the month. I've done the whole program. So, and I understand how effective it can be when you're in the right places. It wasn't until I was in Kansas, my very first year there, and the guys that invited me to come with them, they were actually rifle hunters. And so my first 3 years in Kansas, we were actually hunting with a rifle. We got there, and they had hunted previously there, just bird hunting, and the rancher always told them, "Hey, you guys want to ever shoot some of these brown, rats, as he called them, just come on out here and anytime you want." And Like, I mean, he's a rancher that has just who knows how much property and knows everybody else. And so we met him at this four corner out in the middle of nowhere, when it's just flat as a pancake. I can't see a tree. We pull over on Southern Road. There is this truck, and we go through the introductions. He's like, "Well, I wanted to meet here because we've got the northwest section to us here, and then across the road, I've got the first half of this section, and then we got." And he's pointing at all the, and he's talking and all this different stuff. I'm looking around. I'm like, "Where the hell are we gonna kill a deer here? There's not a single tree. There's not a bush." And then we drove from spot to spot, and he showed us probably 15 spots that afternoon. And there was one property that had some, like a little river bottom, some like a choked thick little river bottom section. And all of us, just our eyes just lit up on that. Like, that's where we're going to be hunting. And that first opening day came, and we were all kind of covering different corners of that little brushy creek bottom that we had found. And we saw some bucks, nothing good, but all of us, when we got back, we're like, "Yeah, I was seeing," but I was glassing up deer like way out in the middle of the grass, just bedded. They were walking around and they bed in the grass, and they just disappear. And it took us a while to realize that the deer there weren't living where there was trees. They weren't staying where there were trees. They weren't. I mean, they'd go through there, they'd move through there, but they weren't using it for bedding. They weren't using it for. It was just a travel corridor. It was all it was, and it wasn't even one that they used often. And that's obviously going to change in different areas where there's more trees or whatever. But for us, it became out of necessity. It's like, well, there's no sense in having a tree stand or even a ground blind at this point. We just got to stay mobile and use our glass, and then find them, and then put a plan together. And that's how it started. I think that same year that I went down there, 11 or 12, one or two. And I guess what was before that, actually, that year in Kansas. But a couple years later was my last year in Illinois that I hunted out of a tree stand, and I haven't went back. I always keep one. I always keep a lone wolf in the back of the truck just in case I find that one spot where, whatever. I know there's situations I've came across where I'm like, dang it, if I just sit on this water hole, that bull's gonna come in, or that buck's gonna. He's using it every day. It's dry. So I'm not ignorant to the fact that I'm missing some opportunities by sticking to the ground only. And I'm not counted out, but I'm having so much more fun on the ground. It's, rattling them in, decoying them in, calling them, just spotting stalks, sneaking, crawling up on a bedded buck it's just so much more fun than sitting there freezing your tail off. And I think that I was having more fun. 2, I was killing bigger, better bucks every year doing it. And 3, I was just sick of sitting in the tree stand. It just became something that a tool that I just don't use very often anymore.
So I want to get into the nitty gritty of how you actually pull off a hunt like this. So I want to get into the actual step-by-step process of finding deer and stalking them down on the ground. But before we get into how you actually do that, I've heard you talk about pulling this off in places like Kansas or Montana, different plains, kind of open prairie type habitat, doing this ground pound for whitetails. But do you think that anything you've done there and had success, could that be replicated, or could some of that translate to trying to hunt on the ground in somewhere like Iowa or Michigan or Pennsylvania in certain circumstances? Like, is there any way that this could work somewhere else, or does this strategy, is this prairie only?
That's a good question. I have not hunted Pennsylvania. I've killed Michigan deer on the ground. My best Michigan buck I killed on the ground. It's very terrain. It's 100% terrain dependent. If it's open enough where you can see them and either see where they're going to or coming from, have them patterned, or see them bed, then it's doable. All you need is a lack of other eyes from other deer to pick you off and to know where their location is. And then it's just a matter of putting in, the variables, lining everything up, and in your favor, and don't let them see you, smell you, hear you, and slide in and get an arrow in them. I mean, I think a lot of guys overthink it sometimes. But I know I've hunted Illinois and Iowa in a lot of spots where there's the deer just don't bed where you are going to be able to see them. So it's in those spots where I've hunted in the Midwest, most of them, it's probably not going to work. Maybe there are some spots in Western Iowa that'd be better, but where I hunted there, it was, those deer were buried in like a tick where they were sleeping. So,
so it's terrain and cover dependent.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So then let's revert though back to what sounds like is your favorite kind of area for this kind of thing, which is that open ground kind of country. Mm-hmm. First off, I have started to hunt in some of these states. I've hunted Nebraska, North Dakota, Montana for whitetails, and I've fallen in love with that Great Plains habitat and just everything about it. And have loved now taking my favorite game animal and chasing it in this different kind of setting. Why is it for you that it's so much fun or so different or so compelling that, from what it sounds like, it seems like almost all of your whitetail hunting now is out in those kinds of places, or at least a good part of it. Why is that so? I mean, is it just the ability to track them in on the ground, or is there something more to it?
I think, you grew up in Michigan. You know what it's like there. I mean, we have how many hunters in the field on opening day of, it's a whole lot. I don't even want to guess, right? Like everybody you meet's an outdoorsman here, and we kill a couple 100,000 deer a year.
Yeah.
You go to Kansas and you look at their numbers, they kill 50,000, 60,000 deer a year. That's it. You go out there during rifle season, you'll see people driving around, you'll see orange in the trucks, and you'll see people hunting. You go out there during bow season, I know exactly who I'm going to see. It's the same guys I see every single year down there. They don't know what they're doing. They're really great guys. I try to help them out. They don't listen to me. They think I'm crazy for not hunting in my tree stand on the one tree on my property that we hunt down there. It's like, and so part of it is that it's crazy. I knock on doors and I don't get told no during bow season down there. People just, it's, so that's a wonderful part of it. The way that the whitetails act in those open prairie areas too, whether it be Nebraska, Eastern Montana, Kansas, they are very, very, very aggressive. And I think it's just because this is also my theory on why they have so many more broken tines. Like I don't remember the last Kansas buck I shot that didn't have broken tines. Now the one I got this year, he broke one overnight, from the night when I first found him to when I found him the next morning and killed him. I think that you take two big aggressive mature bucks in the rut in Iowa. They're 500 yards away from each other on the same property, walking in opposite directions, parallel with each other. They aren't going to see each other most likely. There's too many terrain changes. There's too many, creeks, streams, trees, whatever. It's thick. They can't see each other. They're not going to fight today. You take the same two bucks in Kansas, same distance apart. They see each other, and they're going to close that 500 yards, and they're going to square off. And I see it happen all the time. I think they fight way more out there, and it makes them way more susceptible to decoying, more susceptible to rattling and calling. And you want to talk about excitement. I think it's 4 years now I've been using the little heads-up decoy thing I stick on my bow, and there's a little mount in front of behind my stabilizer. I stick the decoy on that thing, and every single year since I've started using it in Kansas, it's part of why and how I killed the buck. I mean, they see that and they just pin their ears back, and they don't even look at you again. They're coming in there and they're going to come kick your ass. I swear to God, the older bucks see that, and they don't. You could move around, you could shuffle. It's like they don't even look again. Their eyes roll back like a moose, like you see in the movies, and their head starts wobbling back and forth, and they just put on a show and walk right to you. That stuff happens more often than not. That's probably because I'm targeting the biggest, oldest, mature bucks. Maybe the younger ones wouldn't act that way, but there's nothing more exciting than that. So it's easy for me not to my time's valuable, right? And so I've got all these different states and tags lined up. For me to take time out of November to go hunt Illinois, it's tough anymore because I want to sit in a tree stand and hope something comes by, or I want to go to Kansas or Nebraska and make something happen.
Yeah, I get that. I can see the appeal to that for sure. So I want to talk a lot more about that whole decoy thing you're doing, but before that, I want to rewind a little bit and try to walk through the entire process, and then we'll get to the decoying part when we get to that in your hunt. But let's say we're heading out for a hypothetical trip like this, or how about this? I want to go out and do a hunt like this myself this year, and for the last 5 years, I've been heading out west at the beginning of September to do a western whitetail hunt, and I've got a certain way I've gone about it. But I've always focused on the river bottoms. I've never focused on the open country like you have. I've found I would always look for a piece of public land that has a river running through it with a bunch of cottonwoods and, Russian olive cover and stuff like that. Something that's going to get those deer down into that tight space. And then I would observe and then hang tree stands based off what I saw, bed to feed patterns and ambush them in that kind of way. But you seem like you've got a very different way to do it. How do you go about just finding the starting point? Because for me, it's looking online and finding those river bottoms that intersect with public land, and that's my starting point. But when you're looking for the kind of place that has your kind of hunting and that kind of whitetail experience, what are you looking for to just figure out where to start when you're scouting maps or whatever?
Well, basically, I'll look for. It's most of my. I do a lot of e-scouting, I guess you could say, like you're talking there out in the mountains. But as far as the Midwest or the plains and stuff, all my hunting spots that I hunt now and I use now have came from firsthand being there, being in the area, and just looking on with my boots on the ground. Or more often in that area, you're sitting behind a wheel. And just covering ground and looking and then knocking on doors. I think that, obviously they need food, and, there's never a problem with, food. There's usually not a problem with water. Most of the good luck that I have on this type of hunting is in November. So at that point, the bucks aren't thinking about food anyways. So if you can find the does, there's most likely going to be bucks around, and that's basically it. And then it's just a matter of, let's say like in Kansas, knocking on doors for me, acquiring as much permission as possible. A lot of that land that I have permission to hunt on is open to anybody that asks. I mean, it's not like I have sole permission on it. They'll say yes to just about anybody as long as you're promise to close gates and don't leave any trash and don't drive over their fields. It's acquire as much as you can, look for the does, and keep watching those doe groups, and eventually a buck will show up. And it's a lot simpler. To me, it's a lot simpler than and there's less variables than when you're hunting in the mountains. It's just a matter of you just gotta find the does.
Okay, that makes sense. I like that. Let's say then that I'm going to keep my hypothetical me into this. I decide that I'm going to try this kind of hunting. I found an area in eastern Montana or North Dakota or South Dakota or Kansas or Nebraska. I found some stuff. It's got some big open grassy hills. There's some river bottom. There's a few little ponds. There's a little bit of everything. It looks kind of good. And either I've got a bunch of free permission or there's public land and a bunch of it that I can roam. Now I'm heading out there and I arrive and you're with me and you're my guide telling me what we should do, how we should start hunting or how we should start scouting. We just arrive. Walk me through what we're doing next. Are we going to spend the first morning and first night scouting or just walk me through what you're going to say, let's do this.
Let's imagine it's midday. And what we do is drive around and find all the high points, and whether it be the farmer's barn, if he has a ladder that goes up the side of it, or a silo, or maybe an oil well, or an oil retainer, or maybe even just a hill. And those are going to be all the spots that we're going to cover the last 2 hours and the first 2 hours of every day. And we're going to sit up there and we're going to glass. And we're going to rush from one spot to the next. We're going to be at one of them. If there's one of those spots, maybe there's one of those that there's a potential for bucks or for deer to be all the way around at 360 degrees. Well, we're not going to try to get to that one first thing in the morning because we're going to be bumping deer. We're going to save that one until it's after it's daylight, and we can kind of slide in from one way or the other. But we'll want to be at one of them at daylight, and then it's just a matter of covering ground and find them. One of the things that we realized we were doing wrong in Kansas right away. It took us a year to figure it out, but we were doing it wrong right away. And what I mean was the old mentality of get into your tree stand or your blind or whatever, a half hour, sometimes an hour before daylight. I remember sleeping in a stand in Illinois all night long because I couldn't figure out how to get into the stand at night or in the morning. And I literally took a sleeping bag and I went in at night in the afternoon and hunted it, and then I stayed up there because I didn't know how to get in there in the morning. And
did you kill a buck the next day with that devotion?
No. I pushed him to the next guy and the next property over, and he killed him. That was part of my young and dumb years. But so we were literally, bumping deer, just moving to our spots. And unless you have, and I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that are the hardest things to overcome for a Midwestern hunter is getting to and from your stands without being seen. And I think it's one of the most broken, rules of you can't let that happen, and guys do every single time. But that was what we were doing out there. We were moving in the dark, and then we'd see deer, 3/4 of a mile off, whatever, looking back at us when daylight finally broke. I think that once we realized that and we started waiting, there's mornings where I'm sitting in my truck until it's daylight. The truck's off, I'm just sitting there waiting, and then I'll move up to my glassing knob because there could be something in between. And if there is, he might bound over, those deer might bound over and then blow the ones out that I'd be seeing once I get up to the glassing knob. It's just not, it's not worth the risk. You gotta, taking care of all the variables and getting all that, all the little things squared away. That's not one I'm willing to compromise on. It's
how much. So back to the getting your glassing knobs.
Yeah,
how much time will you spend in each spot before you say, okay, it's time to move on to the next one if you haven't found a buck you're interested in? So that's question number one. And then question number two is how many chances will you give a spot? Because I've debated this a lot myself, right? I've got a handful of different locations, and I'll go the one night and check, nothing. I'll go back the next morning, nothing. Then I'm thinking, do I just cross it off, or do I have to keep coming back? How much time per, and then how many different times will you go back and look?
Well, this is, if we're doing it in November, I think you're gonna have already a handle on, or if you don't, you're gonna figure out real quick how the rut's doing in your area, and you're gonna know pretty quick when you get there. If you see does and they're up feeding, and there's no buck with them, he's not there. I mean, maybe he is. Maybe he's just dead tired, and he's laying over in some cut stubble. You just haven't picked him out yet. But I don't give it too long. I mean, as soon as I have everything, 360 degree, sweep of what I can see, if I've covered everything, I'm moving to the next spot because I've got a bunch of spots to glass, and I've got a lot of, if I can glass 10, well, that's better than 5. It's better than, how should I say that? It's better to quickly yet thoroughly glass 10 spots than it is to really just pick apart 5. Now I'm only saying that because it's during the rut. Now, if this was October, it'd be a completely different game. If it were in the mountains you're picking apart, in thicker terrain, it's when they're going to be bedded, it's a completely different game. But right, in November, active, sometimes I don't think those bucks don't lay down for days on end. All they're doing is, keep trying to keep his doe or get a new one or whatever. And I think if you're in the right spot, you're going to know it. Now, how many times will I keep coming back? Boy, indefinitely. I've literally, there's spots that I stop in glass just because I can see so much from it. And I've probably never made a stalk from that spot, or I've probably got dozens of those spots. But every year, one of them, like one new spot, I'm like, oh, we got something here. And then, and then you move to a different spot where you got a better angle of them. And, you just try to keep your eyes on them until they either, bed or start feeding or whatever, slow down. Once they how would you say it, make themselves vulnerable to a play of some sort.
Yeah.
But
I heard you once talking about how one of the biggest challenges of this part of your strategy is just trying to get elevated enough to be able to get an angle down. And you kind of jokingly said that you wanted to someday mount a ladder to the top of your truck topper just so you could get up there and look. Did you ever actually do that? Or do you ever have any other good tricks for getting a better vantage?
I have not mounted the ladder. I've stood on the top of my truck a lot. Anybody that buys a used truck from me, it hopefully hasn't looked up on top, because there's probably some scratches on top of the cab. But and sometimes that's all you need. I mean, when I'm saying these high points and stuff, I mean, a lot of them are only 20-foot difference, but it's just a gentle rolling hill. But and you might have to be 2 miles away from where you think the deer are going to be, but and be 2 miles away to the high point. So it's not always close proximity either. So you got to have good glass. But I think that just getting creative with your vantage points. I haven't went as far as to knock on a door, not for permission to hunt their property, but just maybe to climb their barn. But I've thought about it. There are a couple spots where I know that with Onyx, you can tell they don't own much property. They've only got 5-10 acres there. There's really no hunting on there's not going to be any good hunting on their property, but they've got a gorgeous barn that's 30 feet high in the back, behind their house. And if I could get on top of that thing, man, I'd be able to see everything. So maybe one of these years I'm going to stop at that place and ask them. But that's the way my mind works when I'm out there. I'm looking for anything, and I've climbed silos. But I'm also someone that's not afraid of heights. With my line of work, I'm comfortable up there. So it's everything down there, because it's pretty flat.
It all comes down to getting eyes on them. Now, one of the things that a big paradigm shift, I guess, for me when it came to glassing and finding game was realizing how much it helps to use a tripod with your binos. I never used to do that. And a friend finally just showed me what a difference it made. And now I'll never go out in this kind of hunt without that. Is that something that helps you? Are there any other tips or pieces of gear or anything else that's led you to become a more effective scouting with the glass kind of guy?
No, you nailed it right there. Good glass, good tripod, a tripod that can, like, for the type of hunting that we're talking about, I like a full height one, so I don't have to sit down on the ground. There's no sense in finding a high spot and then sitting down. So I literally will run to these high spots, and most of the time I'm not even taking time to sit. I'm standing up, and I'm I've got a full 6 foot tall tripod or whatever, and it's I want something that I can put the binos on, and that is people who haven't done it don't understand. Maybe they kind of take for granted what we're saying, just so we're talking that because I'm trying to sell a product or something. It is huge. The difference between hand holding a pair of binoculars and looking through them sitting on a tripod is huge. You will find so many more animals. But get as good a glass as you can, and it's the good glass isn't cheap, so it's it's an investment. But that is as far as for finding animals, man. Onyx on your phone is a must, or similar product for land mapping software. Good glass, good boots, good tires on your truck. I don't know how many flats I've had over the years, and it's all simple stuff that goes wrong, but usually. But it's that simple stuff that'll screw up everything when you don't have it either.
Yeah. All right. So we've been here on the ground in wherever we're at. We're in Nebraska, we'll say. And we've been looking, and maybe evening number 2, we finally spot. Well, actually, before we even say that, tell me this. Do you, and I think I already know the answer, but if you spot a shooter, whatever that is for you on this given hunt, are you going to go and change your position or try to make a move, or will you see a shooter but think to yourself, man, I don't know how I can make a play on him right now, so instead of keeping eyes on him, I'm going to move to this other area and check and see if there's a huntable buck there? Or is it once you see a shooter buck, like you're staying on him until it's dark or until he makes a mistake? What's your thought process there?
When I see something that is in the terms of, gets my blood going, and it's something that my brain says this is one we'd be very, very happy with, all my focus is on him. And things happen when you put yourself in the best available, what's the word I'm looking for? The best available proximity. So say he's out in a big wide open flat. He's got, 2 or 3 does with him, and there's another couple satellite bucks that are trying to move in, and they're all kind of spread out around him, and there's just no way in. And you're a half mile away on a little bit of a rise where you can just see over in there. Well, maybe you can't get all the way to him, but maybe you can circle down and get the wind where it's quartering. Maybe not right straight downwind, because I can't stand being right straight downwind of them, because that's where they always expect danger to come from. But maybe get on that quartering side of them and then just get as close as you can, and then see what happens. Maybe they'll move. Maybe they'll move right to you. I've literally had them just walk up to me like I'm just dumb luck. Maybe one of those little bucks will come in there and challenge him, and he'll run and chase him off, and they'll run right past you. So I get as close as I can without being detected, and sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it gets dark and you got to sneak back out and start over the next day. But if I find something that I'm gonna be happy with, putting my arrow through or bolt through, it's my focus is on him. And even if it's not a like slam dunk opportunity, like, oh my God, he's bedded right there, and so I can just walk up that little creek bottom, pop out over the top, sneak over and just slam dunk shot, I will still get as put his mate variables in my favor, get as close as I can, or at least in the best position I think I can be in, and then just wait him out.
So you're saying even if he's moving, even if he's covering ground, you're not gonna stay in your spot and watch to see where he beds or ends up. You'd rather just get after him once you spot him, or is it the opposite?
If he's moving, I'm gonna try to keep my eyes on him. No, I was thinking, I was seeing in my head like deer kind of just feeding in an area, or if he's moving and if it's morning, I'm expecting him to bed soon. I'm gonna keep my eyes on him. That's how I killed my buck this last year. I mean, I found him right at daylight, and he moved, and I had to take my eyes off him because he went over I just could not see him from the side of the country mile, square section I was on. I had to drive all the way around the other side and find a new high spot, and then re-pick him up. Thank God he was still on his feet. But I mean, it's do whatever you can to keep your eyes on him to find where he beds.
Okay, so watch him until he stops for a long time or beds, and then you make your move. What then? Like, what is going? I know this is very situation dependent. Every situation is a little different, but just kind of generically, what's the checklist of things, or the handful of things that are going through your mind as you packed up your tripod and your binos or your spotting scope and you say, okay, I'm going for it. What are the next steps, the next things you're thinking in your mind as you figure out how you're going to get closer, how you're going to make your stalk?
So on a whitetail, in this situation, if I've watched him, he's bedded, excuse me, he's bedded and he's got a doe with him, most likely. Not very often are you going to find a mature buck, at least not one that I'm going to want to kill in this area, or in the Midwest in November alone. So he's going to have a doe with him. They're going to they're going to bed somewhere where they think they have the advantage of the wind and their sight. In these areas where it's a little more open, the wind is your friend, not just from keeping your scent away, but for noise too. They don't rely on their ears nearly as much as a more of a Midwest, a thicker traditional Midwest whitetail. It's always windier there, and lots of dry brush always just clanking together. But they'll bed somewhere where they can see. They rely on their eyes more, and then obviously they use their nose just as much as any whitetail. So I've got them bedded, on a fence line or something, where it's the tumbleweeds have all piled up, and those things will get like 10 foot high piles of tumbleweeds, and they will bed right inside them sometimes. But windbreak too. But so find out where they're bedded, move in, and at that point, I'm gonna ditch the tripod and the glass. All I'm moving in with is a rangefinder, binoculars, or a rangefinder, my bow and or gun. Most times it's a bow hunt though, and I'll probably take my rattling antlers, and I'll have that decoy mounted in the front of my bow. I'll also take a little stake for that decoy too, so I can stick it out by itself in the ground. But it mounts to my bow, and I can shoot the bow with it on there, and it doesn't hinder it at all unless it's windy. And I'll move in from a quartering angle. I don't want to be straight downwind. I don't want to be, they're going to be looking downwind. So I want to be to the point where the wind is almost wrong. Another thing that you tend to get out in the plains is more consistent winds. You don't have as many trees, all these things that block wind and make swirling winds just aren't there. No, you still get ridges and bottoms and stuff, like low and high spots that create eddies in the air currents, and that can mess up your wind. But most of the time, you get a much more consistent wind than you would in other places. So you can put yourself in a riskier position than you could in other areas, because that your wind's only 20 degrees off from him, which might only be like 20 yards. If he stood up and walked 20 yards to the right, he smells you. But he's not going to. And if he does get up, you're going to shoot him, because you're going to be inside his zone by that point. And then I'll just move in as quickly as I can before they get up, because as I said, they fight so much more down there. If you got a hot doe, which if you find a mature buck, he's probably going to have, he's almost always got a hot doe, because he's the man, right? He's the one that's out there kicking all the other deer's ass, and he's the one that's like, all right, this doe is mine. But he's always going to have challengers around, and they're going to come up, and they're going to constantly be bugging him. So it's not uncommon for him to be getting up every 15, 20 minutes and having to run off a little buck, which is a great time for you, or if you're hopefully already in position within your effective lethal range with your weapon, to show him your decoy. And that usually doesn't take much. And just flashing that decoy, holding your bow up, he sees it, and he'll usually look at you, look at the other buck, pin his ears back, and just come over, like almost like he's trying to make loud racket with his front paws as he slams them in the dirt, just clanking his way over to you. If there's no other bucks to keep getting them up, I've stayed out 40, 50 yards and tickled the antlers, rattling antlers together to kind of like pique his interest. And then as soon as he picks his head up, he sees the decoy, and again they come in. It doesn't always work that way, but with the older, more mature bucks, if they see that decoy, they're coming in. And and I'll be honest with you, in a perfect world, I don't care if he sees that decoy. I just want to get him killed, right? So the decoy is kind of my out. If he beds in a spot where I can sneak up and shoot him without him ever seeing me or me ever making a noise, that's the main goal. But that hardly ever happens. Without varying, how would you say, elevation changes in the terrain, it's hard to do a traditional spot and stalk where you literally can get a height advantage where you can shoot them in their beds. Most of the time in these plain states, you need them to stand up, and make the next move, or I should say the last move, for it to happen. And that's usually the way it goes down.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Can you describe a little bit for people that aren't familiar, this heads-up decoy that you're using and how exactly that works? And then once you describe kind of the basics, I'm curious about a little more detail of how you're using it. Like if you have to cover 100-yard, or maybe there's a 50-yard stretch of open ground to the next patch of cover you could hunker down in, and the deer are going to see you. Will you consider sprinting across that with the decoy in front of you, or is it much more conservative uses? I'm guessing. Give me the basics of what it is, and then describe some situations where you will use it and how.
Yeah, it's not a full deer silhouette. It is just basically like a like the old school neck mounts. Like everybody gets shoulder mount now of a deer on the wall. But you remember like seeing ones before, it was just like a neck mount.
Yeah,
So it's only like that was kind of weird. Like half the mount's gone. That's about all it is. So it's like it's not real tall. It's not real big. I mean, usually I'm in a kneeling crouch position when I'm ready for the deer to be, or when I should say, when I'm ready for the deer to see me. And so they can see part of my legs, my shoulders, but they just seem to look right through me. I wouldn't go as far as to say I'd feel safe, just stand up and covering ground. I have used it as I was sneaking up on a buck facing the opposite way. And as soon as he'd like start moving his head a lot, I just hunker down, hold it in front of me, and he would just kind of like look over and look away. But he never did catch me moving. But I was also being very careful. I wasn't, and that was moving in for a second shot after a bad first shot. So that was a dire situation. But I wouldn't say I routinely trust it to cover my motion. It's not real big, but the heads up decoy is pretty awesome. It's got and it's not just for whitetail. They offer them for all different animals. The mule deer one works great too. The turkey one works amazing, but excuse me, it has a carbon rod in the bottom of it that slides into a sleeve that mounts right in front of your stabilizer hole, and it doesn't weigh hardly anything. The antlers are foam, and you can take them off, and they slide right inside the body of the decoy, which is like a thin cloth material. It doesn't weigh. You can toss it right in your backpack. You can hold it. If you were hunting with a buddy, he can literally just hold it with his hand. And then so there's a ground stake too. It's pretty simple. It's pretty ingenious. You're basically shooting. It's just to the side of your bow. The only downside to it is the wind. If it's if it's windy, that's when I keep that little ground stake, which I think they made it for turkey hunting, so you can stick that thing out in front of you with the turkey silhouette on there. But I use it for whitetails and muleys too, because when it's windy, if it's really windy, you don't want that. It's like having a sail on your bow.
No. So you've got it mounted to your bow, and you can use it in the scenario like you described, where you'll flash it once, and then the deer will come in. Will you? I think maybe you mentioned this, or maybe I heard you say it before, but will you also use it as, just like someone might use a big decoy when sitting in a tree stand? You'll have it, and you'll see a deer way off in the distance, and then you'll start rattling or calling, and then once he looks in your direction, then you flash it, and then he sees the second part of the equation that makes him think, okay, yeah, there's definitely something going on there.
Absolutely.
And do you keep it up the whole way until they come in, or will you flash it and put it down and then prepare for the shot? It sounds like you can shoot with it mounted to your bow, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. No, it's most of the time it's attached to the bow or in a ground stake. I'm not really going back and forth with it up and down. I think just having a little bit of movement. It's weird. You'd think that they would see the bow attached to it, but they just look right through you and the bow. And you can just, I've rattled in bucks that I had no interest in killing. And they're 20, 30 yards from me, staring at the decoy. I'm like kneeling in grass. It's like, a foot high. They came in from behind me. So I'm completely, there's nothing, I don't have anything to hide behind. And he's looking at that thing, and I just rocked the bow back and forth in that decoy. And you could just see the hair pop up on the back of his neck, and he just comes a little closer. It's like, but this thing's only, 3 foot tall, and the decoy, and here I am, 180-pound guy with a backpack and a bow, and they can't even, they just, for a buck in a rut, I mean, they just look right through you.
Fired up.
Yeah. And that's why I don't hunt tree stands anymore.
That's got to be pretty intense.
It is so much fun.
I'm tempted to jump right to how you handle the next moment, but I want to rewind just a little bit because I want to dive a little bit further into the stalk. Is there anything else that you do or that you're thinking about to have a more successful stalk into that range? Any tips for being quiet or things we talked about the wind, but are there any other little things that you do to help close the distance or to get that final 10 yards closer for the shot, or anything else that's on your mind when it comes to pulling that part off without the decoy involved?
There's probably things that I'm just taking for granted that everybody knows. But it's, one thing about the plains, there are little cactus and burrs everywhere. Make sure you have some good, pants with protected knees. Knee pads are not a bad idea. You're gonna get just filthy crawling through this. I mean, if you've got a handheld release or a wrist release, I would suggest tucking that thing inside your sleeves. Make sure you have sleeves that you can tighten up around your wrists, because belly crawling across a dry, dusty, or muddy, wet field, the last thing you want is to get up there and you got within range. He stands up and you go to, clip your release on your loop, and it's just caked full of dust and rocks, and you won't function. The terrain, it's funny. I bet I put my equipment through as much abuse hunting that way as I do hunting the mountains.
I bet
it just crawling around in that stuff can tear you up. But I think that gear would make or break the stalk. Comfortable shoes that I stopped using maybe the traditional hunting boots a long time ago. Back when I was just hunting the Midwest, I lived in a pair of lacrosse rubber boots all year long, and I still love them. I still have them, but I don't get to use them as much anymore. I'm using, whether I'm in the mountains or out in the plains, I'm usually using almost like a light hiker or a light mountaineering boot nowadays. and that's kind of my go-to. It's nimble. I can move through just about anything without having to worry about thorns or rocks, brush, whatever. And yet at the same time, it's protecting my ankles and from rolling over in the mountains. But also, you don't need you're not hunting the same spot every day, so you don't need that rubber boot for scent protection like you would with stand hunting. But
Yeah.
so yeah, there's probably it's mostly just common sense on the stalking end. Make sure they don't see you, hear you, or smell you.
There you go.
That's
No.
I mean,
Okay, let's touch a little bit more on one other thing you mentioned there, which was maybe tickling the tines together or calling.
Mhm.
From everything I've heard and seen, and some things you've mentioned too, it sounds like rattling and calling is particularly effective in your mind in some of these places. Would you agree with that? And then,
Yes.
okay, then secondly, talk to me a little bit more about how specifically you are using those two tools. I'm interested in your call sequence or your rattling sequence, or when's the right time to do it, when's not the right time to do it. Walk me through the Tony Trietch 101 on rattling and calling prairie whitetails.
Well, in a perfect world, I don't have to. A perfect world, my morning's going to start with me at a high point, glassing, and I'm going to see him bed, and then I'm just going to walk up to him and shoot him. That's the perfect world. How it usually happens is maybe I do find him, but now he's bedded in a spot where, I can maybe sneak in, get close, but now he's got a doe with him. They could stand up and feed the other way. Maybe I want to draw his attention over here. In that case, I'm going to use him more of just kind of a curiosity thing. And I'm going to make as light of a sound as I can. I don't even want him to really know for sure what he heard. I want him to think, what did I just hear? What is that is that 2 bucks sparring? That's probably the more often the way I end up using them. But let's say I don't find anything, for the first hour or two, glassing, and it gets to be 9 o'clock in the morning, and now at this point everything's bedded up. That's when I will make and this only really, I shouldn't say it only works in certain areas. I've only had luck with it in certain areas, and this is when I'll go to the spots that might have a little bit thicker, brushier areas where I can get close to where they're bedding out in these open grassier areas or brushed in areas without them seeing me, and set up a decoy out in front of me a little ways. Maybe I'll have another one right by my side, and that's when, I carry my set of random antlers are like, it's a 160 class buck. These are big solid antlers that I found a long time ago, and they make great sound. I used to do a lot of shed hunting. I've got a lot of sheds. It takes the right set of antlers to make the right sound.
You really believe that, huh?
Oh my God, I absolutely.
I've always wondered.
Yeah, I cannot stand all those fake plastic ones out there. I think I actually heard Steven talking about Renella on one of his podcasts about one of those little pack racks or whatever he liked, and I was just shaking my head. He's like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?"
I just hate the bulk of carrying a big set of antlers. That's the thing that always deters me.
Well, do you like the bulk of carrying the big antlers out?
Okay, touche.
You might have to carry them in.
You win. All right.
The sound they make is so different. And I could walk in my house, walk over, I've got like 10 match sets, and there's 2 of them over there that are magical. And they just have a sound to them. And I am not bashful with them. I've just about broke my thumbs before. I'm too proud to cut off the brow points, but I should cut off the brow points. But it's hard to cut the brow points off a nice set of sheds. But
Agreed.
But once I get set up in a spot like that, I just let it rip. I don't do it. There's nothing gentle. There's nothing tickly about it. And I want to make as much noise. I want them to think that all hell is breaking loose. There's a hot doe or two, and there's 2 bucks over here trying to kill each other for her. And man, it's worked very, very well. And even when it doesn't work well, to the point where you find a buck that you want to, like, oh, holy crap, here comes a 180-inch deer, you're still having fun because little bucks are running over top of you, and sometimes they're running the opposite way because they're scared. But it's yeah, good things happen when you're loud out there. But that's a totally different situation than, sneaking up as close as you can to them and then being quiet. And that's pretty much the only ways I use them. It's either a late morning setup or an early or late afternoon, early evening setup where I don't have a play, I don't know where one's at, and it's just almost like a cold call setup, where I'm loud and aggressive, or it's a last minute. I've got a buck located, I'm in tight, and I'm tickling him to get him up on his feet.
Yeah, I gotta believe that. The shot experience and whole process is different for those two scenarios. There's got to be there's the situation where you sneak up on one and maybe don't need to use a call at all. You just slip right in and then you get a shot with that deer being unaware of your presence at all. Versus the shot where you rattle one in, it sees your decoy, and it comes in ready to kick your ass. Can you walk me through how you handle the shot, those moments of truth, the shot process itself, and anything unique to either one of those scenarios?
I just black out and wake up and there's dead animals laying around.
Yeah.
When I was younger, actually, that is what happened. But I think it's easier for me now with the decoy because they've made the last move and they've pinned their ears back, or whatever, and they're coming, and I'm being forced into a situation. He's coming. He's okay. Now he's at like point blank range, because a lot of times they'll just keep walking to you. I mean, eventually they're going to get to a point when they're 10 yards or 10 feet, and they're going to there's some moment, hopefully they're going to realize you're not a buck. So you've got to shoot them before that. you're in this, the pardon me, the how would you call it? Ethics police might not like this, but you are forced with a lot of frontal and quartering two shots. Because of that, with the decoy, because they're coming to kick your ass. They're not trying to move around you. They're coming right to you. Mm-hmm. Whereas with, if I'm finding him bedded and I'm sneaking up there and he's just laying there, I'm not being forced to make the shot. He's not moving in. I don't have, the clock's not ticking, and that way it's, then I have questions. Should I wait? Should I wait for him to stand? Do I have a window to his vitals? Is this, what is the best situation then? And then I still have questions. The younger me was just, as soon as I could see his chest, I'm going to zip an arrow through it. Older me asks more questions of myself now, and gets me in trouble sometimes. I had both situations this year. My first buck in Colorado this year, I was able to sneak up to him, and he never knew I was there. And I decided to wait. That could have went horribly wrong, because eventually he did stand up and just, spin around like a dog in his bed 3 times. And right before he laid back down, I shot him. But 15 minutes later, the wind took a dramatic 180-degree change because a big front came in, a big storm, and the thermals were going straight down the hill at that point. If he had waited until that happened, he would have winded me. So I got really lucky there. Whereas maybe I should have taken the shot earlier. I mean, I could see his chest, but he was, obviously you have more of a room for error when they stand up. And I just waited for that, and it worked out. And then in Kansas, that buck, he was, this year he was bedded with a doe, and I could just see the tips of his antlers. I knew he was there, but I had no shot. And I was about 50 yards from him. I tickled the antlers together. And actually, I don't even know if it was that necessarily, because another buck came in too. Another little buck was coming in, and they got up to kind of, I think, more or less deal with him than the noise I was making. But the second he saw that decoy, he just pinned his ears back and started walking to me. And then at that point, it's like, well, I've got an arrow on the string. This is what I wanted. He's coming, and he's making a decision for me. I'm going to be shooting here soon. So I think it's easier for me when they make the last move.
Yeah.
Either way.
Anything you've learned about taking that quartering to or frontal shot, as far as making that as lethal as possible? Do you have a range, like, hey, they got to be within this range for me to take that shot, or where exactly are you placing it? Any details on pulling that kind of thing off?
Well, number one, I shoot a heavy arrow. It's I think it's around 515 grains, 70 pound. I've got a Hoyt turbo that's spitting them out there pretty fast, even for a heavy bow. So it's got a lot of thump to it. If you're shooting a 350 grain arrow and 55 pounds of draw, maybe an older bow that isn't so fast, this might not be the right play for you. If I hit the scapula, I'm probably going through it. If I hit where the leg bone thickens out below the scapula, I don't think anyone's getting through that. I have hit that before. It's been over a dozen years ago, but that's a thick bone down there. However, the ribs in front of the shoulder are not much different than the ribs behind the shoulder. With that being said, if you can, a quartering two with, it's just like when they're walking, if you with a quartering away, when that leg goes forward, you want to slip the arrow in front behind it. Well, when they're walking to you, when that leg goes back, you want to slip that arrow in front of it. I've had great luck. I've literally had full pass-throughs when I, on a quartering two shot that went in front of the front shoulder and exited out back through the rear ham and out zipped across the wheat field. Lots of them. With whitetails, I use a cut-on contact rod and a iron will. It's a fixed head. I don't use mechanicals, and that's one of the reasons I don't want. I've heard horror stories of mechanicals on a hard quartering shot, catch a rib and glance along, or skim along the outside, and that's the last thing I want. So, it's not like an elk. With an elk, you've got to be really careful. Those ribs are way thicker, and you got to aim for that hole in the thoracic area, the base of their throat. The whitetail, basically, I think of, just putting the arrow through the center point of their chest from whatever angle I'm at, and it's never failed me. But
tell me this. I feel like this would be a good way to wrap this up because I've been holding here for a long time and I'm having fun with this one. So I'm selfishly getting as much as I can because I love hunting these kinds of places. So I really want to add this to my repertoire. But is there any one example from all your years of this style of whitetail hunting that comes to mind to you as like the perfect encapsulation of this whole way of hunting? Is there a story like that, a single hunt that just kind of wraps a bow on this whole thing that you could walk us through how you did this and that illustrates this whole thing nicely?
Do you want one that went like almost perfect, but took how should I say that? Like I could tell you about this last year, I guess, but in the end, I got my deer, but it was I had two different arrows hit a fence.
It sounds like a hell of a story.
Oh my God. Yeah, it was. So this buck I got just this past year. I was down there for probably a week and I didn't, I just was not seeing what I was, used to seeing. In Kansas, you get the opportunity to draw, an either species tag. So, and I did not draw this year. I only had the whitetail only. So that kind of, cuts you right there in half of what bucks you're looking for. And then I'd seen bucks probably as high as 160, but I just wasn't willing to cut my tag on one. Nowadays, basically, I had a guy tell me a long time ago, when you first see that buck, if it's not a no-brainer, if it's not a holy crap, that's the one. If that feeling isn't there, you got to pass. If there's a second of doubt in your head, if you have to argue with or negotiate with yourself whether or not it's a shooter, it's not.
Yeah.
And I learned the hard way he was right, and I don't, so nowadays I'm pretty picky, and I just wasn't seeing what I was wanting to see, and the pheasant hunting was good, so I was killing some pheasants, but I just wasn't seeing many bucks. And then I say it was like the third day of pheasant season, maybe. I just use that as a time reference. I don't remember the actual date, but I was coming back from just class, and it was already to the point where now I wasn't even I was leaving my last glassing point and was heading back to the ranch to get a night's rest, and a buck across the road in front of me, and it was the first really old mature buck I'd seen last year. And I stopped the truck and jumped out with the binoculars, and he was a couple hundred yards off the side of the road with some does, and I got to watch him a little bit. The next morning, I was on a different high spot, maybe about a mile from there, where I could cover that whole area or a lot of it. And just luckily, he was the very first deer I saw, and he had a doe. He had a couple other bucks that were shadowing him, and he kept running them off. He had broken off one of his brow points already, which they're both really big brow points. They're like 6-7 inches. So he'd done that overnight, and I just waited him out. He probably took, it took longer than 30 or 9 o'clock before he finally bedded. But in that time, he'd went, almost to the middle of the section. So, a half mile from each county road and over the edge where I couldn't see him. That was the one I was telling you earlier. I had to drive all the way around, find another high point over there. And luckily I picked him up again before he laid down. And the whole section I have permission to hunt on from 3 different landowners. So I didn't have to worry about the fences as far as, property lines go. I just had to worry about the fences. The fact that he was bedding along one. It was super easy. There was no stalk. I just grabbed my bow and the decoy and walked, because he was on the other side of a little knoll. And once I wasn't even going to be within sight of him until I was like 40 or 50 yards. So I basically just got to where I could see his antler tips, knelt down on some cut milo. There's a lot of times in those areas, the milo will be like terraced off on the hills where they have like little flat spot, then it drops down, a flat spot, and then it drops down. I think it just makes it easier for them to harvest it, and maybe helps with erosion. But it makes for great little spots to kneel behind and cover maybe your lower half when you're showing a decoy. And there was a little buck that kept coming up. And I tried tickling the antlers to him to get him to stand up. And I could see his ears twitch, and he'd turn his head a little bit, but he wouldn't stand up. And so I think in the end it was another buck that got him and his doe up on his feet. And she saw me and walked right over to me, and she saw me first. She was probably 20 yards from me. But so when he saw me, the decoy, now he sees, not only has his doe walked away from him a little bit while he was, preoccupied with this little buck, there's another little buck over there in the cut milo, which is me. And his doe was walking over towards it. She's just curious what I am, because obviously the does are a little more, they don't have testosterone rolling at that time of the year, so they're a little more curious as to what you are. And whitetail does are actually, I usually don't like them to get that close, because a lot of times they will blow out and screw up the whole thing, but she didn't. He saw me and just pinned his ears back and just started, doing that moose walk where they just kind of tip their head left and right and back, and he's just coming. And it's to the point where I drew my bow back, and I'm thinking he's going to stop. He's at 30. He's at, okay, I know that fence post is 30. And he just keeps coming. I'm like, I got to let down. Now I got to shift a little bit, because the stalks are tall enough. I can't really swing my bow through them. I've kind of got to go up and around. And the doe's looking at me like, this buck doesn't look right. But I swear to God, those older bucks, once they get it in their head that they're going to scare you off and run you off, they get the googly eye thing, and they roll their eyes back, their ears are pinned back, and they're coming. And there's been bucks that I've kind of just messed around with in the past. Like I had no intention of shooting, stand up and yell at him to get him to leave.
Wow.
But this guy's coming, and he's coming, and he finally gets to the point where, he's either got to jump the fence to me, or now he's going to be going further away. And he just stops. He's just standing there. He's not moving his head. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to shoot him right through the fence. It's barbed wire fence. There's 4 strands of it. There's only 2 of them that are in play, and it's really, this is the closest shot I've had in a long time. What are the odds of it hitting it? And it hits it, and the arrow instantly goes down and back. Oh no! And you could see by the way you could hear it too. It wasn't the standard, like, thump sound. It was more of a smack because the arrow was also coming at him kind of sideways. It wasn't good. And so I threw another arrow on. He had instantly made a jump. So now he's about 5 yards further, which no change in pin. And what are the odds of it hitting the fence again?
Wow.
Apparently pretty good, because it hit again and it went between his feet. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And this time, he walks a little further. And by this time, and I'll admit, I'm frazzled. I cannot believe, what are the odds of this happening? I've put all this work in this now, and now I'm shooting like a jackass. And you feel bad, right? Because it's supposed to be a quick, clean kill, so long story short, I am out of arrows very quickly here, and I've got 2 arrows in them. And this is one of those days that ends well, but there was moments in it where like this. There's a moment where I'm like, I need more arrows. I did everything right up until when I didn't.
And now you did hit him. It hit the bar and then hit him. Okay, for some reason I thought it ricocheted off and you missed both. But okay, so you hit him. He's still got an arrow. I see.
The first arrow hit him, and it was a lethal shot. Like, it's low. It's maybe diaphragm, maybe liver, but maybe on the other side of the diaphragm. I'd later find out it was behind it.
But he's just so hopped up on kicking your butt. He doesn't even care that he just got hit.
No,
wow.
Did not care. Second arrow hit the wire, went low between his legs. He didn't even acknowledge it. He moved out a little further. I want to say the third arrow connected, but he was walking away at that point, and it wasn't. It was basically replay the first shot, and then he laid down. And I tried to sneak in and get another one in him, and I couldn't get any closer than that fence, because climbing a fence, he would have picked me off. And I didn't want him. He's still at that point. I didn't think he had any clue what I was. I mean, I could still see him. So, and I was last 2 shots. I just caught. He's laying down in brush, and I tried to squeeze him through there, and it didn't connect. And eventually, I'm sitting there along that fence line now. He's moved. We basically moved about 50 yards forward. His doe's laid back down. He's laid back down. He's not doing good. I'm like just expecting him. His head will go down, and I'm thinking he's gonna die. And that other buck comes back, literally scoops up that doe, hops the fence with her, and they take off. And that buck watches them, and I'm just like thinking, just stay there, buddy. It's time. Just stay there. He got up and he walked over to that fence, and I didn't think he was gonna be able to do it. And he kind of like high-sided himself for a bit. He tried to jump it, and then he slipped over, and he made it, and he started walking after him.
Jeez.
And I know. So I ran back to the truck as fast as I could, got more, loaded the bow with arrows, drove her up, because now I got to ride back around the other side of the block again, where I have view of that side, where I originally spotted him in the morning. Got over there. They're all 3 laying down in the field, and, basically he never left that field. But it involved me waiting, probably not as long as I should have, because if I had just never moved in on him to get another arrow on him, he would have just died right there after a couple hours. But I tried to slide in and end it sooner, and I actually had the decoy on the bow. That was one of those times when I'm crossing that little opening area, just hoping if he does turn over here and see that, because there's nothing really in between us, that he will see the decoy. And I was able to get another arrow in him again, but the wind caught that decoy, and it wasn't a good shot. And it was, I've had this conversation where it was one of the worst and best days I've had in a long time, because, in the end, I got the buck I wanted, but there were tears from it. And, I felt like shit, because what started off as a simple mistake, hitting a barbed wire, moved on to me rushing things, not taking my time and just letting them rest and stiffen up and die, pushing it, not thinking, ahead of time about what the wind's going to do with this decoy on there. Just, I didn't. A time came when my good judgment kind of and how I should move along with it kind of went out the window, and I just had one thing in mind, and that was get him dead as soon as possible. And in the end, it worked out. But yeah, it's that might not be the type of story you were thinking about to wrap it up with, but that was the one that's most pressing on my mind because of maybe for not the reasons of grandeur, but reasons of it taught me a lesson. So
yeah, no, I think that's an important. I think that kind of story makes me think of a few things. Number one, it reminds us all that you can do everything right, and still every once in a while those nightmare scenarios will happen because we are chasing a wild animal and just stuff happens. So you better be prepared for it as best as possible, and like you did, even though it didn't turn out the way you wanted to. You tried to end it as quickly as possible. You tried to do the most ethical possible next thing. And then it also, just for me, when you hear those kinds of stories, you just can't help but have this admiration for an animal that can just keep on living. And it's just unbelievable, the toughness and the will to live that these critters have. I mean, they are survival machines. That's for sure. So I don't know, man. I'm fired up. I am just after hearing this, I'm ready to get out there. Is what I'm ready to do. This is fun stuff.
Yep, tag season is upon us. I'm before we started the podcast, I was going through my Utah app that's going in this afternoon, and one by one, the state's applications will all be in, and then before you know it, it'll be scouting time.
And then right back into it all. The never-ending cycle continues.
Hopefully.
Yes. Is there any place that if folks listen to this and were really interested, intrigued, and wanted to either see some of your writing or follow along with your hunts or anything, is there anywhere that you would tell people to go for them to connect with you or to learn more?
My Instagram's probably the best place to follow along. And that's just Tony Trietch, or I guess there's an underscore in between the names at Instagram. I write for Rock Slide, and I'm on their staff, but I'm not exclusive. So my articles pop up in different magazines.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Tony, I really enjoyed this one. This is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, these kinds of areas. So I'm making a plan to try to add this kind of hunting to my repertoire, and it was awesome to be able to pick your brain about it. So thanks for taking so much time to do that.
Well, thank you, Mark. It was a pleasure being on.
and get some water, man. You're struggling.
Sorry, yeah, no, I got a frog right there at the last second.
It happens. I've had it happen a time or two myself. So
yeah, just getting over a cold, so it's been tough.
That's no fun. Well, thank you, Tony, again, and let's stay in touch.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mark.
And that's a wrap, my friends. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for being a part of one hell of a great community. The Wired Hunt listeners, all of you guys out there that are avid hunters and new hunters and mentors and conservationists and just lovers of wildlife and wild places, and the folks that walk the walk, just don't talk the talk. Man, I think you guys are awesome. I'm proud to be chatting with you weekly. I'm proud to call you guys my friends, colleagues, community. And I think I'm going to stop talking now and just let you get outside. Hopefully you're shed hunting, picking up trash, scouting, having a good time. Hopefully we'll have some sunshine here soon. So until next time, thank you and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.